Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today we got a lot going on. A couple things. We're going to do a little bit of work on that, the Dell Lab server, the Windows Lab server. And we're going to do that too. Did you get all that? And we're going to do another video in the Windows Lab series of videos today. I'm going to show you how to set up a secondary or backup domain controller for our lab, and the steps that you need to be aware of and what you need to go through to make that happen. So hopefully everybody's looking forward to this video. I've had a lot of requests for it, and if you follow these steps, you won't foobar your DNS like I did on another project. But you know, it's a rookie mistake. Live and learn. So I guess I got nothing else to say. Let's get the video started, huh? So I'm told on good authority, well, the internet, if you can call the internet good authority, that a 2.5-inch SSD drive will fit in these Dell drive trays. And as you can see, I've got one. Here's a regular spinning hard drive and a Dell Caddy. Well, I'd say these are Dell Caddies. I ordered these off of what was it, eBay or Amazon, and I think they're knockoffs. They're Chinese-made drive caddies, but they work. You know, that's all that really matters to me. They work, and they pass their little light beams. You know, there's a little on the back here. I don't know if you can see it, if it'll focus, but you see those two little lines there. Those are both little plastic inserts that the LEDs shine through so that they can light up the front of the drive. Anyway, I digress. So what I did was I matched up the SSD in the tray as best I could, and as you can see, the screws for the SSD fall at the end of the drive cage. And here's a little made in China sticker, so that's why I'm saying I think these are knockoffs. Anyway, I'm only able to put 2 screws in this SSD, but it doesn't seem to lift out of the tray or anything, and it appears that the backplane, or that the serial ATA connectors will line up just like they do on a regular spinning drive. As you can see, I've got it right out to the edge of it's just a hair behind the end of the drive tray there, the drive is. And it's the same with the SSD. Now, this is not probably the best SSD I could have chosen for the server, but it'll make do for now, because what we're just trying to do is test to make sure that H700 controller actually supports SSD drives, and 2, see what kind of speed increase we're going to get on it. So this won't be a long-term storage device. I have something else coming I don't want to talk about yet till it gets here, but somebody was nice enough to send me something to test in that Dell server. So get some light here. Now I'm going to set this up here for now, and then I'm going to pull out this insert down here. That's just to keep the airflow going. Always save these little things. You either want to have one of these in there, that way they redirect air properly, they baffle the air properly, or you want to have a drive tray in there like this. So I'm going to put this in slot number, I think it's 3 down here at the bottom. So let's see if it'll fit. Yep, looks like it fit. Because right now the virtual machines for the lab are on this spinning hard drive. It's a 1 terabyte Hitachi, but it's only serial ATA. It's only a 3 gigabit serial ATA, so it's a slower spinning drive, slower throughput. Let's go ahead and insert that and close it. Alright, so let's go out to our iDRAC controller here. That's really odd. Sometimes I get that where it can't load the page for whatever. We just blow past it. Let's go ahead and log in. Now the machine is not powered on because we want to go into the SCSI. I'm sorry. We want to go into the H700 controller when we boot this machine on. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a virtual console, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it to power on. You can probably hear the server spinning up. I don't see any smoke coming out of the front of it, so moment of truth, we will see if that new SSD drive is actually going to work with this new Dell controller. Well, new to me Dell controller, the H700. One of the reasons I put it in there is so we could use SSD drives and drives beyond 2 terabytes. So I just wish these servers, I know why the servers are slow booting up. They have to go through a bunch of checks, but for you and me it makes for kind of a slow video, so I'll speed this up if we need to. There we go. So there, now you can see, if we scroll down here, you can see there is an unconfigured physical disk. It just shows its ATA. Let's see what it shows these as. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go up to the top here. I think I want to hit F2 and I want to create a new virtual drive. Yep, there it is. So we're going to select this drive, come over here, and we'll just call SSD Store 1. Okay, so it's adaptive read write back, and it's going to be 223 gigabytes. So we'll tell it OK, and it's wanting to initialize the drive. We'll tell it OK, and now we see it in there. It's a virtual disk. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape and tell it OK. And then I'm going to send Control-Alt-Delete to reboot again. Alright, so let's come up here to computer management. And we're going to initialize that drive. So we'll come up here to disk management, and it should hopefully see that new drive in there. Yes, it does. Okay, now I could sit here, this is the SSD drive right here. I could sit here and run through a click on it, delete, click on it, delete. This is one of those instances where I want to go out to the command line because it's just easier to do. So pay attention to this right here, disk 2. That's the one we're interested in. So I'm going to show you a little trick, and yes, it is using the command line. So I'm going to come here to the Windows button. I'm just going to type in CMD for command, and then I'm going to right click and run it as administrator. Yes, I do sometimes use the command line. Now we're going to type in disk part, and that'll bring up the it's Windows version of fdisk, if you remember that from the old days. So we're going to type in list disk, and that should tell us all of our hard drives that are out there. And you see disk 2 is online, and it's 223 gigabytes and 227 megabytes free. So I'm going to select that disk, select disk 2, and now we'll do a list disk again, and we want to see an asterisk next to disk 2 indicating that drive has been selected. And then all I'm going to do is type in the word clean. Be very, very careful with this command line program. You can wipe out a disk in a heartbeat, and you're going to play hell getting the data back off it if you don't know what you're doing. So now I'm done, and I'm just going to simply type exit and then exit again. And now when I go under computer management, we should see, it should prompt us under disk management to initialize that. It may not prompt us to initialize, but it will. Yes, it does. And I'm going to go ahead and use GPT because it's not going to be a boot disk. It's not over 2 terabyte either. You know, it's not like a 4 terabyte drive, but I'm just going to use GPT. And then I'm going to format the volume. Create a new simple volume. Give it the full capacity. I'm going to make it drive letter S for SSD. I'm trying to think if I have any other conflicts with that, and I shouldn't. Now, I could use REFS on this. That's the Resilient Healing File System from Windows, but I'm not going to. So we'll just call this SSD Store 1, just like we did when we initialized the drive with the H700 controller. Next and finish, and then it should go out and it should format the drive, and indeed it has. It's done a quick format. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to start moving virtual machines over to that storage. So I'm going to start with the lab units, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is where that move command comes in very handy. So let's just start with the Windows 10 Enterprise Lab 1. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose move. Except the read the screen and the wizard tells you what it's going to do next. Now I don't want to move the virtual machine, I only want to move the virtual machine storage. And it says move only the virtual machine storage to another location, either on the server or on the shared storage. So I'm going to do next. And I'm going to move all of the data to a single location. Next. See, it didn't like stuff happening. I'm going to create one called virtual machines, and then under that a new one called VHD for the virtual hard disks. So I'm going to go back one to virtual machines and have that be the folder that it moves it to. Next, and then finish. Alright, so it looks like the move was successful. Let's just verify that. We'll right click on it and go to settings, and we should see now that our hard drive has now been moved to the S drive, and our smart paging file location has moved to the S drive as well. And then if we come down and go under Explorer and look on the S drive, we should see a virtual hard drive in there. We do. And we should see the virtual machine file information right there, and we do. Let's go ahead and move the rest of these lab units. I want to put this entire lab over on SSD storage. So I'm going to go ahead and move another one, just like we did previously. And finish. Alright, we'll let that run, and then I'm going to go ahead and move all the other workstations, and then we'll come back. Now, something else I want to do is I want to run Crystal Diskmark on my drive, and I just want you to see the difference between a serial ATA spinning drive, the read-write times, and a SSD drive, which is this is the spinning D drive. Here's the Crystal Diskmark test results. Sorry, drew a blank there. And here are the SSD test results. So you can see for yourself quite a big difference in IOPS, which, you know, when you're running virtual machines, that's what it's all about, is IOPS. So you can see you get a phenomenal increase in speed just by virtue of swapping out those spinning hard drives for SSD drives for the virtual machines. So the idea is they'll boot faster, there'll be less contention between the virtual machines, the more bandwidth we have, and as you can see, we have plenty of bandwidth. So first things first, one of the most important things about Active Directory is DNS, because without having your DNS set up properly, your Active Directory is not going to function properly, and you're going to have all kinds of trouble. So this is the primary domain controller on the lab. So the first thing I want to do is go under DNS, and I'm going to come to the root of the DNS, and I'm going to right click and go down to properties. Now, you don't hear many people talk about this, but these are forwarders. So because you're running Active Directory domain controller, you have internal DNS. You have your own internal DNS server. So your internal DNS server for Active Directory needs to know where to forward requests that it doesn't know how to resolve. And it tells you right there. Forwarders are DNS servers that this server can use to resolve DNS queries for records that this server cannot resolve. So all you have to do is go into this edit field here, and you can type in, for example, 208.67.220.220, I believe is OpenDNS. And if I just enter that and tab over, it'll resolve it. So it'll try Google, the secondary Google, and then it'll try OpenDNS. And all I have to do here is click on OK, and you see how it's added it down there. So step number one before we set up our secondary domain controller or backup domain controller, whatever you want to call it, is that we want to have our forwarders put into DNS. And the way we'll verify that this is working, if I come down to the Network and Sharing Center and I go into my network adapter, if you look here, it's pointing to 127.0.0.1. Well, what IP address is it? That's a loopback address for this local machine. So these settings are telling this computer to come back to your local host for the DNS translation. Now let's just verify that DNS is working. We'll come here to a command prompt, and we'll ping google.com. Okay, it's working. Let's try YouTube, youtube.com, and they're all resolving. Let's even ping ours, mcstx.net, see if we get a reply, and we do. So it's all working. DNS is now working as it should, including the forwarders. So now I'm comfortable going out and setting up our other domain controller. Now, one other thing to note is you need to know the IP address of your main domain controller, which is 20.1 in our case. So I'm just going to minimize this, and I'm going to bring up another window. I have already installed another 2016 operating system, and I have joined it to the domain. So let me show you what my settings are here. So if I come here and open this folder and right click and go to Properties, that's a shortcut way to get to this, by the way. So you can see I've named it 2016-2-lab1 MCS local. It's already joined to the domain. The other thing I want to do is come into my network settings, because remember, you always want to set up a hard-coded IP address for your domain controllers. I always do it for any servers. I just make sure I statically assign an IP address. So we'll go into Properties under TCP/IP. And you'll see that right now it's at 20.5. I've got my router put in there, my gateway 20.254, and I'm pointing my DNS to my primary DNS server. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this Google public DNS here. I only wanted to use my internal DNS on my server, and there's a reason for that, because I don't want DNS getting confused and trying to go out to Google's public DNS when I need to be resolving internally. So if I ping mcslab.local, I need to type it, mcslab.local, it should resolve and point to 20.1. And then if I ping 2016- what the hell did we call that other machine? Let me go look here. 2016-lab1. It should resolve internally. And then if I were to ping google.com, it should point to the what's happening is the forwarder on my Active Directory domain controller is telling the DNS where to go to get this request. So you see DNS is working. Now, consequently, if my primary domain controller were down, I wouldn't get any DNS resolution. It would return an invalid address, or it would use cache data. Alright, so in order to get Active Directory set up, I'm going to click on the Windows button here and I'm going to go in through Server Manager. That's how I'm going to show you how to do it. We'll just quickly go over to our local server here. And so we got our IP address in there. We've already been joined to the mcslab.local domain. I've also done my updates. Now, what's really important is your time. You want to make sure your time zone is set right and make sure time is coordinated, because what's going to happen is if your time is off between the two domain controllers, you're going to get Kerberos errors. What I'm going to do now is come up here to Manage, and we're going to do Add Roles and Features. And you can read this if you choose to, but go ahead and read it, pause the video and read it if you want to. I'm going to click Next. This is going to be a role-based or feature-based installation. Tell it Next. We're going to select our local server 2016-2-lab1 because that's where we're going to install this on. And what we're going to do is install Active Directory Domain Services. And you'll see that once you select that, it's going to select all these ancillary tools that you're going to need in order to manage Active Directory. So we're going to go ahead and add features. Then we're going to click on Next. Next. You can read this about Active Directory Domain Services. It even tells you here things to note. ADDS requires a DNS server to be installed on the network. If you do not have a DNS server installed, you will be prompted to install. So we're going to do Next, and then we're going to go ahead and install. Now this is going to take a couple of minutes to install, and I'll come back once it's done and we'll continue on with the video. The installation is complete, but there are some, if you read right here, configuration is required, even though the installation succeeded. So we'll close that. And then we'll come up here to this little yellow exclamation point, and it tells us configuration is required for Active Directory Domain Services. So we want to promote this server to a domain controller, so we're going to click on that link right there. Alright, so we're going to add a domain controller to an existing domain. It's already selected the mcslab.local domain for us, and it's also supplied the credentials to perform that action, so it knows we're going to use the Adama account. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. Okay, this is, we are going to have DNS on this. We are going to have this as a global catalog server. And then we need to give it a directory services restore mode password. You could make that whatever password you like. I just generally keep it the same as my administrative login. That is not best practice, but you know, we're in a small little lab environment. So go ahead and click on Next. Now, I'm not going to do anything here. You can safely ignore this this message with a backup domain controller, and you can click on Show More, and it'll tell you exactly what that's talking about. So we'll click on Next, and we can specify install from media if we needed to. You can specify additional replication options, like right now it's set to replicate from any domain controller. You can set that to the primary domain controller if you want to. I'm just going to leave that set at the defaults, and I'm going to click on Next. Normally, best practices, you would install the operating system on OneDrive, and then you would have your database log files and sysvolume folder on a different volume. Again, that's best practice. In the real world, I just put it on the same drive as the operating system for my labs. And now, one little nice thing, if you're a PowerShell user, if you click, what it's done is it's asked you those series of questions through the wizard, and now it's going to create a script file because it's going to do everything through PowerShell. But if you wanted to view that script, you could click here, and then you can even save that script so that anytime you have a domain controller or want to promote or add, promote it to a domain controller, you can just come in here and fix these fields that don't match or incorrect, and you can run this thing any number of times. I just wanted to show you that feature. But for me, I'm just going to click on Next, and it's going to verify prerequisites. It's going to come back with some non-critical errors. You can pause the screen and read them, but because the last two are the last one is fine, I can begin with the install. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click on install. And you see right here it's waiting for DNS installation to finish. So as the installation continues, the computer is going to warn you that it is going to shut down and restart as part of the Active Directory domain controller promotion. So it should come back up here momentarily so we can log back in and continue. All right. I want to make sure I'm logging onto the domain. That's why I clicked other user. But you can see down here it is going to assign me in the MCS lab. Now, Server Manager is not going to come up automatically. I'm going to need to bring that up manually because I've told Server Manager not to run automatically at reboot. And we'll go back to local server here. And what we're going to be looking for is any notifications up here, so we'll let it finish. You notice it's got Active Directory services, and it's got DNS installed now. Let's go and look if there's any notifications. I don't see any. It is now a domain controller, but what I'm curious to see is what it did with DNS, with the DNS entry on the TCP/IP stack. Okay, so you can see now it's pointing to the preferred DNS server. You notice how it changed this. It's pointing to 192.168.20.1 as the primary DNS, and then it's pointing to itself, to the backup, or to the loopback address as the secondary or alternate DNS server. So let's go out and look at DNS here. And what I like to do is I like to create shortcuts on the desktop to stuff I'm going to be using on a regular basis. So you just right click here and then send it to the desktop, create a shortcut. I'm going to do that for Active Directory users and computers. I'm going to do that for computer management. I'm going to do it for DNS. And normally I do it for DHCP, but it's not on here. I'm also going to do it for group policy management. And then I'm going to go under DNS. And you can see it's replicated our zones there. Let's see if it's replicated everything else. So if we go to Properties at the root and go to Forwarders, you'll see that it's replicated everything from our main server. Now let's just verify that Google we're able to ping outside of our domain. So we'll run the command prompt and we'll ping google.com. And there you go. It works just like a charm. So now we have a primary and a backup domain controller, both sitting there and serving out Active Directory. So in the event one failed, the other one would kick in automatically. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn the firewall off. You know how I feel about Windows Firewall. It's not best practice, but it's what I do. So that's off. Let's refresh the screen here. And then we'll come here to Remote Desktop and we'll make sure that is enabled. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reboot this server and make sure that everything has been saved, that it comes back up with the same settings. Alright, so the server's back up, so let's log back in and let's just make sure all of our settings are still in there. And I'm referring of course to the IP settings, DNS settings, the firewall being turned off. I've had instances where Windows will come back up after you turn the firewall off, and it will not detect the network properly because it's switched over to a public or private network. So I just want to verify that hasn't happened again this time. And we can do that through Server Manager. It's just easiest to go here. Now, if you're on a spinning hard drive, we're not. We're running this off of an SSD, but if you run, this takes forever to come up. Let's see here. Yeah, our domain is correct. Our time is correct. Our IP address is correct. Let's just verify that all of our settings are correct. Let's see, it's looking to 20.1 as its primary DNS server. That's good. 20.254 is the gateway. 20.5 is its IP address. So it looks good from here. And it's kept the firewall off, and it still sees we're a member of mcslab.local. Alright, so we have a second domain controller installed in our lab. And now what I want to do is I want to bring up a Windows workstation. I'll bring up a Windows 10 and a Windows 7 and show you the one change that we may want to make to the workstations. But the first thing we need to do is go back over to our primary domain controller. I'm old school. I call them primary and backup domain controllers. You're just going to live with that. The primary domain controller is the first domain controller, the big kahuna. We're going to go back under there under our DHCP and make sure it's handing out the right IPs for our lab. Because remember, we have two DNS servers now. We have a primary and we have a secondary. So we need to make sure that secondary is being handed out to the workstation. So let's do that now. What I'm going to do is come into the main Active Directory server. Let me minimize this so we don't get confused. So I'm on my primary domain controller, the one we set up in a lab before. And if we go here to DHCP, we want to make sure that we expand this under IPv4 and go to Scope Options and go to DNS Servers. And we're going to remove these. We don't want the public DNS in there. What we want to do is have the private. So we're going to put 20.5 in there. And we're going to add that. And it's going to verify that it is a DNS server. We'll go ahead and apply that. So now when we come up to when we bring our workstations up and they get an IP, now I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up fire up a workstation here, and we're going to see what kind of IP address they get and DNS they get once the machine comes up. So I'm going to go ahead and log in to this virtual machine, and we'll see what kind of IP information or IP address information we get once we're logged on. Okay. And don't worry about it couldn't connect all drives, because if you don't want to see that message anymore, we can just right click on there and disconnect it. And it won't come up again. Alright, so let's see what kind of IP information we're getting here now. I hate what they've done to this. I always get lost. See, change connection properties. Here we go. But it does, see, it tells you the DNS suffix, but it does, there they are right there. I lied. So it is not only updated, we've updated DHCP, and this has gotten a new lease evidently, because now it sees 20.1, which is our primary domain controller, and 20.5, which is our backup domain controller. So we do indeed have both DNS servers listed in there. Now let's go ahead and come here and run command prompt. We'll just make sure we can go out to the internet, and we can. Hey, let's try to ping one more address. Oh my, there is such a domain as UnkyJoesPlayhouse.com? I wonder what could be out there. Well, let's put it this way, I've reserved the name so that I can keep my branding, and that is a horrible domain name, Unky Joe's Playhouse. I bet you I have to tell 20 people how to spell Unky, because it's going to be UNCY or something like that. But Unky is pretty self-explanatory, wouldn't you say? Yeah, you know you spell that with a K. Anyway, I've reserved the domain, and it's just out there and parked on Hover. But eventually I'll be moving my mail to that, and we're going to be setting up a mail or a web server with some forums and that kind of thing. So that's coming. I don't know when yet, but you know, you're the first one to hear it. If you watch these videos all the way through, you're the first one to hear it. So, and this may also be a test on a drawing. I'm going to start testing my subscribers to see who listens to my videos all the way through. And one of those is going to be, you have to go back into a video and you have to pick out what I said at a certain point in order to win the drawing, because we've got a drawing coming up here on a piece of equipment that some people are going to want to get their hands on. But anyway, I digress. DNS is working. The backup domain controller is working. We have our lab up and running, and everything is working well, including our workstations getting the correct DNS servers. Well, there you go. I think we've covered that pretty completely, soup to nuts, what you have to do to make that happen. And we've also been able to put an SSD drive. Yay, that was my main goal on all these server updates, was to be able to put SSD drives and large hard drives in those Dell servers. So I guess we're successful, huh? We can end the video now. Now, I have gotten some questions from people specifically about putting Exponology on those Dell servers, and I came to the conclusion that I'm better off to keep Hyper-V on both of those Dell servers, because it just works. The drivers work. I've got those Mellanox cards in there, and I really didn't want to futz with having to put a different network card in to get Synology to work and all that. It was just more trouble than it was worth to me. So I'm not a good guide for installing Exponology on those Dell R710s. Some people have been able to do it, but they've had to go to an H200 controller that was flashed in IT mode. I've got one of those H200 controllers in because I want to do a video on how to do that, how to flash that card, and the steps you need to go through. But I decided it was more trouble than it was worth to try and put Exponology on one of those boxes. But you know, if you want to give it a try, go out and check the exponology.me or the Exponology fan site, and they'll link you to the forums where those that information is on those Dell servers, or about Exponology in general. Well, there you go. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative as always. Give us a thumbs up down below if you liked it. Leave your comments in the comments section. If you want to correspond with me, don't send it to my don't send it to the messages on YouTube, because I very seldom see those. Send your emails to unkyjoesplayhouse@gmail.com, and pretty soon we'll have our own email address at our own domain. But until we do, send them to unkyjoesplayhouse@gmail.com, and I'll try to respond to your emails as soon as I can. Now keep in mind, I am not a company that is designed to be a tutorial. I expect people to be able to look stuff up on Google. So if you start getting really technical answers, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't have a lot of time to sit around and answer hundreds of emails every day on the same thing. All I can tell you is watch the videos from beginning to end, and then go out and Google what I've shown you on some of these installs, because unfortunately I don't have time to hold a lot of hands. I'd love to be able to hold everybody's hand, but I just really don't have the time. And that's not what this is about. This is about me sharing with you what I've done. I'll help any way I can, but if it's simple stuff, one answer, you know, simple answers to a couple of questions, that's fine. But when you start giving me a laundry list of, I'm sorry folks, but you're going to have to go out and figure out some of this stuff on your own. And if you have specific questions, then of course I'm more than willing to help. So hope everybody understands that. Anyway, hope you liked the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Like I said, donate. We've had some more Patreon subscribers and people donating through PayPal coming on. I had a subscriber the other day contacted me. They want to send me a care package. So if you want to send something to us, that's fine. Let me know via email, and I'll send you an address to send it to. And we greatly appreciate any donations you want to send our way. So thanks again for watching, and don't forget, we'll see you on the other side.